When the battleface brand was originally launched, the first market that was entered was the United Kingdom. In 2018, as a cover holder of Lloyd's, battleface entered the market with a very specific and niche type of product specific to thrill seekers and adventure travelers. Travel is a battle, put your face on, is where the name came from. Now, in 2024, the United Kingdom remains a very strong market for battleface and will be the focus of our topic today on the Battleface Insights podcast. Tune in for more as we get into the United Kingdom and travel statistics that may surprise you. I'm Clay Coomer, host of Battleface Insights. This is episode 4. Welcome, fellow travelers, to episode 4 of Battleface Insights. I am your host, Clay Coomer. I am the head of marketing at Battleface, and for today, we are going to get into some travel statistics for the United Kingdom travel insurance market. When I started digging into this data, I began to get pretty interested and fascinated by some of the things that I was finding. And you'll see by the title that I think you may also be surprised by some of the metrics that we're going to get into. And as we get started in our first segment, we are first going to get into 3 quick facts that will kick us off, and then we will get into the heart of the data and what we see going on in the UK market for travel insurance. Okay, so some quick facts to get us started with episode 4, diving into the UK market. Quick fact number 1, the UK market for travel insurance is estimated to be at 1 billion British pounds. That data is as of 2023. And if we then look at quick fact number 2, the population of the UK in 2023 was just over 68 million, which equates to about 0.85% of the world's population. And another stat that's not listed here is that the average age of a UK citizen is 40 years old. So I would say it's a pretty young country. And then quick fact number 3. So this is a new stat that I've been playing around with, and I'm referring to it in economic terms when trying to quantify travel insurance on a market by market basis. The estimated travel insurance per capita for the UK market is estimated to be at about 1463 pounds. And if you look at that compared to the United States market, the United States is coming in at 1492 USD. So I'd say those two markets are pretty comparable when you think about it from a per capita perspective. And then the Australia market is coming in strong at over $71 Australian dollars per capita. And in last week's episode of the Battleface Insights podcast, we dove into the Australian market for travel insurance. And again, if you look at it just by those three countries, again, you can see that the U.S. and U.K. are very similar. The U.S. market for travel insurance is estimated to be around 5 billion USD, with 335 million as the population. So that's basically the equation. So you take the population and divide it by the estimated market size in terms of premium value. So those are the 3 quick facts. And next, we're going to get into the number 1 surprising stat that I found as I was doing my research for this podcast. So the number 1 surprising UK buying behavior statistics that I was able to uncover through my research when looking at policy data from battleface for the second half of 2024 was that 48% of battleface UK travelers or insureds bought a single trip policy while they were already on their trip. So essentially, what that means is nearly half of the UK policies that were purchased from battleface were people that were either just starting their trip, leaving the day of, or they were a couple days into it. And there's going to be a stat coming up in the next slide that we're going to get into that shows a comparison between these, we'll call them post-departure transactions versus pre-departure transactions. So again, this was the surprising stat that, again, I felt was very interesting. It's not a data point that I've ever seen in any other market that I've covered. And again, I think it suggests the uniqueness of the battleface single trip policy in the UK as one of the only, if not the only, provider in the UK market that offers a policy like this that can be purchased by UK travelers when they're already on their trip. So again, interesting data point, and we're going to keep talking about it coming up here on the next slide. So as I mentioned, we're going to get into the comparison between post-departure versus pre-departure. So you'll see in this particular slide that on the left-hand side, we're getting into pre-departure metrics, and on the right-hand side, post-departure, all from battleface travel insurance policies that were purchased in the second half of this year from UK travelers. So again, like we touched on the last slide, 48% of travelers are buying while they're already on their trip. And the opposite side of that is 52% are buying in the typical fashion that I see, which is prior to departure. And then the next data point is what I was alluding to when you look at the average trip length. The average trip length for a pre-departure trip is coming in at just over 10 days. So when you compare that to post-departure coming in at just over 7 days, you can see that there's a pretty clear indication that these post-departure travelers are a couple days into their trip, just based off of the averages. And the last two data points here that we'll get into is the average age of traveler, average age of an insured on an order for a battleface travel insurance policy. A pre-departure policy is an average age of 35, and a post-departure is coming in 4 years younger at 31. So skews a little bit younger in terms of travelers who are buying a post-departure policy. And we're going to get into a broader view of the data when we look at age range brackets in a couple slides from now that I thought was pretty interesting. And then the last data point here is the average premium paid per insured. And from a pre-departure perspective, it's coming in at 61 pounds per insured, and from a post-departure perspective, coming in at 36 pounds. So if you work in the travel insurance industry and you look at some of the two data points above, this likely won't come as much of a surprise, because policies are generally rated by age and also the number of covered days. So with a lower age and less covered days, naturally you're going to have a lower average premium. So we're going to get into some more data coming up here next. We're going to look at some order statistics that I found to be pretty interesting, but by and large, par for the course. All right, so here are some other order stats that I thought were worthy of presenting in this week's episode of the Battleface Insights podcast. When we look at the average amount of premium paid in pounds, when we look at all single trip battleface policies, so not separating it out by pre and post departure, the average person paid 49 pounds. So I would say for all intents and purposes, that's a pretty low amount to pay when you're considering the benefits that come with a policy. And then the other stat is the average number of insureds per order for these single trip transactions, which is coming in at 1.38 insureds per order. So this is really signaling that a lot of the policies that are being sold are to essentially one traveler on an order. So there's not really a whole lot of indication of larger groups that are having multiple insureds on one order. It seems pretty evident just based off of the volume that we're seeing that a lot of these transactions are pretty low in terms of the average premium paid, because a lot of these orders are just one or two travelers. And again, this is made evident by this 1.3 insureds per order data point. So now we're going to dive into the age brackets that I mentioned in the last slide, and how old the average travelers are, and what some trends that we're currently seeing. So in the second half of 2024, what we've been seeing as far as the insured travelers' age is that it skews heavily in the millennial age bracket. So that 28-year-old to 43-year-old age range. So 50% of travelers fall categorically in that space, which if you think back to the stat that I rattled off in the quick facts, and that the average age in the UK is 40 years old, this tracks with who we're seeing at battleface by policies. And the other thing that I think is worth noting too, not necessarily centered around the age brackets, but when you look at the average days of departure, or the number of days between when a policy was purchased to when the trip actually starts, it's coming in at over 18 days. And that is looking at the pre-departure purchases only, because it's an irrelevant data point when we think about post-purchase, because people are already on their trip. So 18 days, from my experience, is a pretty short window of time. This data point suggests that these travelers are buying their policies very close to the departure date. So, on average, less than 3 weeks. When we look at the U.S. market, just as an example, we typically see this data point be around 90 days, and at a minimum, sometimes it'll be 60 days or 30 days. But typically in the U.S., we don't see a days of departure number this low. So this is certainly an indication that the purchase of travel insurance is more of a last minute type of thing as they're gearing up for their trip. And the last little bit of demographic information, aside from age and days of departure, is the number one selected extension on a policy. So we offer 3 different extensions when somebody is in the purchase process. And the one that was attached the most was the activities and sports extension. And that came in at about almost 9% of travelers who opted in for that. And I think this correlates with the average age as well. Younger travelers who are off doing more adventurous, sportsy type things. So that all kind of makes sense. So now we're going to get into destinations and where these travelers were going. So as far as destinations go, in the second half of 2024, UK travelers were going to, the top 5, 4 out of the top 5 were countries in the European Union. So we look at number 1, which was Greece, coming in at 11% of travelers, followed by Spain, Italy, and Turkey and France. So when you take those 5 destinations, it ended up being about 30% of travelers were going to one of those 5 destinations. And again, 4 out of the 5 were EU EU countries. And then on the right-hand side, we also know if travelers are just going to one primary destination or if they've indicated they're going to multiple countries. And the data for the second half of the year is showing that 86% of these travelers are actually only going to one country. And the minority of this is that only 14% indicated that they're traveling to multiple countries, so 2 or more countries that they put on their policy. So those are some of the top destinations and a little bit of context around that. And we're going to get into our recap here, summarize, and be on our way and conclude episode 4 of the Battleface Insights podcast. All right, so to recap what we have learned in episode 4, 48% of insured Battleface UK travelers purchased their policy while they were already on their trip. So again, that was the more fascinating statistic that I found to be really interesting. And I think it speaks to the uniqueness of the single trip policy that we offer in the UK market as being one of the only options to travelers that are already on their trip and having the ability to buy. The second takeaway is that pre-departure insured Battleface UK travelers, they were buying their policies on average 18 days before their scheduled departure date, which, as I mentioned, is a pretty quick turnaround time in terms of this being more of a last minute type of purchase leading up to their trip, and is a bit of the opposite of what I see in other countries, particularly the United States market. The average premium paid per Battleface policy, it varies significantly, as we covered. If somebody is a post-departure insured versus a pre-departure insured, we saw that the average, when you put everything together, was 49 pounds. But when you look at the variance between pre-departure and post-departure, pre-departure is coming in at 61 pounds per traveler, and post-departure is coming in at 36 pounds per traveler. And the last key demographic here is that 50% of the Battleface UK travelers were in that millennial age range, between 28 and 43. 86% of travelers are only visiting one country that they indicated on their policy at the time of purchase. And 4 out of the 5 top countries that were being visited in the second half of the year were in the European Union, with Greece coming in at number 1 at 11% of purchases. And that, my fellow travelers, concludes episode 4 of the Battleface Insights podcast, where we covered insights for the UK market. It was a pleasure going through this data. I learned a lot personally. I hope that if you yourself are in the UK market and you had a chance to listen in, I hope that it was valuable insights for you. And of course, I look forward to going over more data, more insights in our next podcast. Not sure what topic we're going to cover next, but it will be in the new year in 2025. So hope everybody has a safe holiday season and a very, very happy new year. Thank you so much for tuning in. You have been listening to the Battleface Insights podcast, episode 4, diving into the United Kingdom and some travel statistics around what has been going on in the travel insurance market in the second half of 2024. This podcast episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Clay Coomer. If you'd like to review our sources from some of our data, please review the slide that's on your screen right now. This podcast was reviewed and edited by the Battleface compliance team, led by the managing director, Sophie Goodchild. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of Battleface Insights, and we will see you again next time. Have a happy new year.